Post-Apocalyptic America versus Post-Apocalyptic America. If I was a betting man, well, I'd put my money on Post-Apocalyptic America. But that is because I am a genius. I am very smart. Two hit video game series that both tackle the same premise in just completely different ways. In one corner, we have the Wasteland series by inXile Studios, owned by Microsoft. And in the other corner, we have Fallout, made by Bethesda Game Studios, owned by Microsoft. So really, whichever one wins, Microsoft wins. Because, much like me, if Microsoft's going to make a bet, they bet to break even. Hey, I'm SirFelixTheCat of Talk a Better Worlds, and today is Nerd Talk Thursday. Today's topic, we're going to talk about Wasteland versus Fallout. Let's do this. So, neither of these games is made by the studios that created them. Wastelands was released in 1988, developed by Interplay Productions. That was mainly a text-based adventure, but not totally devoid of graphics, as you can see from the images on screen. Interplay eventually went under, and the founder and CEO went on to found inXile Studios. So, I guess, in a way, it is kind of still under the same studio. Fallout, on the other hand, was made in 1997 by a studio you may have heard of recently, Interplay Productions. But it was by their Black Isle Studios division, who would go on to become Obsidian Entertainment, the talented studio behind the hit Fallout game, New Vegas. So, the best Fallout game. Funny how both games kind of fell back under the original developer, even if a less permanent return for Fallout. Both IPs have changed as the years went on, Wasteland keeping their top-down, open-world RPG nature, but making graphics more of a focus, and going with a more XCOM-style combat system. Meanwhile, Fallout, once the license was obtained by Bethesda Game Studios in 2004, the series had a drastic shift in gameplay, going from top-down tactical role-playing game into a more action RPG, with either a first or third-person view, depending on your preference. Now that I have touched lightly on history and visuals, let's get into what makes these worlds great and why I prefer Wastelands over Fallout. Let's start with Fallout. My introduction to the series was Fallout 3. This is the first title after being acquired by Bethesda Game Studios. Coming from a background of JRPGs and older RPGs, I had not really seen a world quite like this. It had a deep and intriguing lore of classics, kind of like Baldur's Gate, with the gameplay of a first-person shooter. It had elements of survival mixed in with sci-fi tech and even some horror. Now, I'm not really the biggest fan of shooters. Up to this point in time, I had really only played Bungie's games and some war shooters in the past. But this is more my style of shooter, where I could literally just stop time with a Pip-Boy and target specific body parts of enemies and see the percentages of likelihood of shots gonna land, without me having to actually manually aim, which I'm pretty trash at. And that's really fantastic for me since I kinda tend to rely on more of a spray and pray style of shooting, but ammo is limited, especially in the early hours of this game. The world of Fallout is set in a timeline that slightly resembles ours, but with a big change after World War II, where the world went harder into nuclear power, but never moved away from the aesthetics of the 1950s. It's pretty cool looking take on retro futurism. Other changes include heavier focus on robotics and advanced weaponry. So, the games take place in the future, with Fallout 1 starting in the year 2161, and the last entry, Fallout 4, starting proper in, 2287. I won't get into everything that happens up from the first game to where we are now, as this would require several hours of video. Something that you and I just don't have time for, but let me list at least a couple key things. The Mr. Handy robot was introduced in 2037 by General Atomics, a company that specializes in robotics and energy weapons. With the assistance of Robco, they would make military robots as well. The Vault-tec Corporation, America's largest nuclear defense company, made a deal with the government to set into motion Project Safe House in 2054. This project was essentially to build many massive bomb shelters called vaults that would have their own ecosystems to house Americans in the event of a nuclear war, asteroid strikes, or potential life-ending threats. Power armor was created in 2067. In lore, this is more powerful than a tank. However, that's not really the case in gameplay, as is it would kind of just make power armor basically the end of the game, as nothing would phase you from that point forward. Still, it's pretty durable in the game. And then there was the Great War, which started in 2077, not Cyberpunk. So a global thermonuclear war started, and within about 2 hours, the world was turned into a wasteland, with billions of casualties caused by nuclear blasts and the radiation. And then there's the Institute, which is located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. They started experimenting with a forced evolutionary virus in 2077. They abducted test subjects from the wastelands and basically put this virus inside of them. And this virus would create the super mutants, massively increasing their muscle mass and giving them immunity to radiation and disease. However, it kind of did affect their brains as well, causing them to be a little slower and just more aggressive overall. And again, I'm not going to list everything in the game's history because that's just way too many, but these are at least a few key events that essentially make up the world of Fallout. I encourage everyone to really just go and look up the lore in this world. It's going to be a long read, but it is pretty interesting. The first part of it is going to start off basically just like our history, with a few slight changes before World War II. And then there's Wasteland, which, as mentioned before, this game has more of a tactical style of gameplay. However, it doesn't really have that same level of lore that comes with the Fallout series. However, where it lacks, it does make up for it with a sense of wonder when you first discover all these new people, places, and things. There's political intrigue in this game. There's mad scientists, a psychopath animatronic Ronald Reagan, and some AI overlords. The story in Wasteland is a little bit more wacky, but it still manages to grasp that cold darkness and just desperation that you're going to get from a post-apocalyptic world. And what really kicks this one off is your choices and what you do actually matters. Are you going to save this village? Are you going to save the laboratory, which is possibly growing more food for everybody? Are you going to choose to side with the mayor, who possibly could just be a total Nazi? Or are you going to team up with one of his kids who might try to actually fight to save the world? Or heck, they could be evil too. I mean, you can also team up with the cannibals if you want, or, fail to do their mission and watch them die. It's a very, very interesting game. But I'm really not going to go into the history of this one. Key things is Ronald Reagan was president. The Bears won a Super Bowl. It's small stuff like that. But then they have a great war that also just basically ends the world. Now, let's talk about why I feel one of these is better than the other. And as mentioned before, I think Wastelands is far superior. And it might not really be because of the companions, because they're pretty much on par. You might get more dialogue out of the Fallout companions, but Wasteland's companions kind of have that JRPG aspect I've talked about in the podcast before. You may not interact with them as much, but you're going to learn to love them. You're going to be so interested in their backgrounds. Like you find in Wasteland 2, you're going to be in this one town should you choose to save it, and there's going to be this lady who's locked up. And, well, she comes off to you as she's a Native American. And you'll free her if you want and get her on your team. She's really good with a sniper rifle. But as you go through the game, you're going to learn more about her. And you're going to find out that, you know, some of her history is just a complete lie. And she did it to basically fit in, be cool, and, you know, just throw some interest into her life. Who else do you get? You're also going to have some people on your team that are straight up just from the military group that you're from, which is pretty cool. You're the Texas Rangers. You are the Rangers. You are the elites of basically the entire Wasteland. There's no one better than the Rangers. There's some evil forces that might have more numbers and more gadgets, but compared to the Rangers, they're all just trash. You have the AI, which you do have AI in Fallout. You have the Institute, as I mentioned before. You have the clones, which ends up dealing with a lot of racism, which is pretty interesting. People don't accept them, even though you have cool ones like Nick Valentine. But I don't know. Just the things and places you see in Wasteland, to me, personally, are just far superior. I also like that when you're on a world map, you have random battles. And as I said before, I'm a big fan of JRPGs. My favorite series being Dragon Quest, which, up until the more recent games, was always just random battles. I feel it just adds a little bit of juice. Yeah, it can get kind of annoying when you're like focused on, oh, I gotta get here, and you're gonna get in a battle just every 2 seconds. It happens, but it's more experience for your people, not just like experience points, but you're learning how to take out these enemies, how to line your people up, and yeah, you're wasting ammo, but you're growing. You're truly growing as a person. Instead of just having set enemies here, there, and there, it just adds that extra juice to life, I guess. The stories, I do like Fallout New Vegas. You do have the wacky Wastelands perk you could put on, which makes things a little more interesting. There's not really much to it. Wastelands, on the other hand, it has a lot of wackiness. You're going to find, what is it? I believe it's in 3. There are people who are basically dressed up in costumes. Like the leader of their group is dressed up as a vampire. You have people who are dressed up as crazy clowns. It shows more insanity. You also have an evil Santa Claus with elves, and he's making drugs in this big factory. The whole story is just so crazy and wild, and it's just going to keep you intrigued. It's hard to explain, but the lack of lore, which should be a turnoff to me who loves lore, but you find out so much about the characters and the world as you play these games. That alone just kind of puts it past Fallout to me. And yeah, I know everybody has their own opinions. You might like Fallout way more than you do Wastelands. You might just like it for the gameplay style. You might appreciate the extra lore. But in Fallout, I don't get that same sense of wonder. Even if you explore the whole map, go to every location, there's not that big of a sense of wonder. Everything is basically going to be cut and paste the same. Again, New Vegas probably did it best. You do get to see more interesting things. You get to see a war between the NCR and the Legion. And you kind of get the same aspects from that in Wastelands. Let's look again at Wastelands 3. So you have the governor, who is just completely insane, but his 3 kids split off. One of them joins the psychopath Ronald Reagan AI robot guy thing. One of them goes off on her own and basically joins bandits and becomes like their leader, or scavengers, whatever you want to call them in the Wasteland. And the other one is a coward and hides behind just more crazy people. Each of them has their own paths, or you can just say, screw them all, I'm just going to support the Rangers. We're here in Colorado. We were trying to make plans to get supply lines going from Colorado down to Texas, but you know what? We're going to do this our own way. Any choice drastically will change the game, but it just adds so much more that you have that ability to choose. It's more like real life. Are you going to go to work today? Or are you going to quit your job and go find another job? I mean, I've done that. I flipped a coin one day and decided like, hey, quitting this job, and I'm going to go apply at a different place. We have that freedom in real life to make choices. In Fallout, you have kind of a false sense of freedom. There's some freedom you could do, like in, again, New Vegas. You can get all these different factions to join you, which is just going to kind of change the end of the game in a minor way. You're still going to go up against the NCR or the Legion. Cut and paste. But in Wastelands, who you choose, you might have to go up against all of these different factions or get one or two of them on your side, and the end combat is going to be completely different. Like, you can just join the governor and kill all his kids, and the end of the game is different than if you had teamed up with one of the kids or just went balls to the wall and just kept the Texas Rangers as their own thing and just tried to liberate Colorado as a whole. There's so much to these games, and both franchises, they completely deserve respect. Even even Fallout 4 with its very limited dialogue, thanks to them adding a voice to your character and basically giving you yes, cocky yes, no, and I'm emo no. Not really many options there. Wastelands, you have usually at least 4 lines of dialogue that are all completely different. They actually tell you what you're going to say instead of just being like, hey, you know, we're going to make you guess. And that's not cool. That was the biggest letdown of that game, honestly. Now, one thing that Fallout does have above Wastelands, in my opinion, is Fallout 76. And I know a lot of people probably won't agree with that. Fallout 76, being an online game, adds a little more background, even though it did change some lore, tweaked it a little bit. Even though some people say it's in an alternate timeline, I really don't care. But having that online play and having that bigger map and basically more history with other players kind of does add to the franchise. But still, it doesn't add in the way that any of the improvements in Wastelands 3 adds to anything. Wastelands 3 being my favorite game of, I believe it was 2020 when it came out. That is my #1 game of the year. It was fantastic. It had me hooked. And you had this really cool AI-controlled car that could just destroy enemies for you that you took into battle. It was its own little unit, and that was dope. Not really many games do that. It's usually tactical games like that. You have, there's an XCOM style game that I'm forgetting the name of, and it doesn't really matter at the moment. It's like Project Phoenix or Phoenix Point, something like that. But it adds so much. The power armor, they both have power armor, except for Fallout's and lore would be way stronger. And it really does save you a lot more than the ones in Wastelands 3. However, the ones in Wastelands 3 are just a huge kick from what you had. Because you're basically just wearing like leathers and essentially just weak armors. Once you get these like couple different power armor suits, they're not even really power armor. It's just like a really cool enhanced looking suit. But they add so much. But really, let me know how you feel about these two series. Have you played them both? Do you think that I'm just completely off my rocker by saying Wasteland is better than Fallout? It's really just my opinion, and you have your opinion. Let me know down in the comments. And until next time, take care. Hey, thanks for watching.
Give us a like if you enjoyed it, and dislike it if you didn't.
Let us know what you think about the channel.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Tell your mom.